I find it quite fascinating the way car manufacturers differentiate two vehicles that are essentially exactly the same under the skin, and that is exactly what we have here. This Hyundai i30 sedan, first launched in late 2020, facelifted in February 24 in Australia, is essentially exactly the same as this Kia K4, the Sedan replacement that launched here as a brand new model in January 2025. Now, the difference between this N-Line Hyundai here, N-Line Premium, $41,500, and this K4 GT line, $42,990, is less than $1,500. So, at least in my opinion, it could be potentially quite fascinating, the difference between these two vehicles that, like I said, are almost exactly the same under the skin. I'm Nathan Ponchard, and this is Chasing Cars.
Chasing Cars. Honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
When I say the same dimensionally, I mean exactly the same. Both these sedans here measure 4710mm long, which is actually quite long for a small sedan. They both ride on 2720mm wheelbases. They are both based on the latest generation of Hyundai Kia's small car platform, which the i30 sedan introduced in 2020. They are both roughly the same height. The Kia is 5mm taller than the Hyundai, and the Kia is 25mm wider than the Hyundai. And other than that, like I said, almost the same. And under the bonnet, they both have a 1.6 litre direct injection turbocharged 4-cylinder. But then when we start to get into the details, the differences start to emerge. The Hyundai has 150 kilowatts and a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. The Kia has 142 kilowatts and an 8-speed torque converter automatic. So once we start to nut down into these details, you can really tell that even though these cars are essentially the same, they're actually really quite different. Being more than 4 years old, the i30 sedan has already been through a midlife facelift, which debuted roughly a year ago in Australia, and the N-Line here is very much sporting that look. It looks significantly different to the models below it, all of which look very plain in my opinion, whereas this has a huge element of i30N about it to make it really look quite aggressive and youthful. Very much like the Kia, it still has that horizontal light band thing around the front, sort of artificially extended through here with this chrome band here, but it really is quite different too. The bonnet slopes straight down, where the Kia sits flat in the middle. The windscreen could be identical, but I suspect it's slightly different. The door glass is shallower. The rising belt line on the car is a little bit steeper. It doesn't have any hips at the back. It is very much about all those creases and angles. And I suppose when you nut it down, it is a more visually challenging car, but it's also a more youthful car, something that the youth of today will embrace more than someone who wants to be sort of classy and elegant. This is not classy and elegant. It's just kind of tough and cool, in my opinion at least. Let us know what you think. The closest the Kia comes to looking like the Hyundai is at the front, although the K4 tries much harder to make itself look wider. Here, this doesn't look like a pair of 80s sunglasses. It looks like completely its own thing. It does still have that faux chrome band in the middle that looks like it extends the lights across, but it has these big bits down here that just broaden it as wide as possible. All these cool LED lights here and a much higher bonnet. You can see it from the driver's seat here before it dips down, whereas the Hyundai falls really quickly. And even looking at these cars, I can tell that the K4 has slightly more upright A-pillars instead of curved in like the Hyundai, which you can again feel in the car. And while both of them have 18-inch alloys, it's right here where we can start to see the differences between them. The i30 N-Line wears Goodyear Eagle F1s made in Germany, W-rated. The K4 GT line wears Hankook Ventus Prime made in Korea. So a little bit faster, a little bit sportier, and that is very much the way it's going to play out when we drive these two vehicles. It's from rear on though, and particularly the rear three-quarter angle where the K4 looks the more expensive car and a newer car. It very much fits that design ethos that less is more. It has nowhere near as many creases and strakes on the vehicle, but in the detailing of the surfacing, it is borderline exquisite. It is really lovely. From the back here with these LED lights, it's trying to be as wide as possible. This is a small sedan trying to look like a medium or a large sedan. It's trying to be a stinger, even though it isn't. And it does have a presence on the road. Everywhere you look, even from having the gloss black around the rear arches here, having these weird boxed windows for the C-pillar. Someone said they look like they were designed by AI, but I actually think they're much better than that. They give a little bit of extra light inside. The i30's just got strakes there. The roof, even the sunroof, it's bigger. It's one big glass pane. It lifts and moves along the roof. It has this futurism about it that the i30 doesn't. It actually seems visually like an older generation of car, which it essentially is. Now, my favorite part about the K4 is these hips. It sort of bulges out on the side. It is called a Coke bottle hip because the body does this, and it has this crease that comes in from the top here and more down the bottom here. Just blends from the middle of the door to nothing, and it hides the back door handle here. But it does have one fatal flaw, and that is that every time, or certainly the first time you open the back door, you will know how babies are made. And it doesn't matter who you are, it'll remind you once and you may never do it again. But a kid could probably open that and hit themselves in the jaw. So that's definitely styling over function. Boot-wise, 508 litres in the K4, 474 in the Hyundai. It's much of a muchness. They're both huge. They're both practical. The back seats fold, all that sort of stuff. As sedans, they are terrific. But this sedan here, the Kia, is the one that has more class about it. One important detail, though, is that while the K4 and the i30 sedan both have their boot openers pretty much in the same place and their rear camera there, only the Kia has something to hold on to here to shut the boot. The Hyundai has nothing. You just end up with ugly finger marks all over the back of the paint. First impressions inside the Kia K4 is that it's all about visibility, functionality, and packaging. Sitting here with this big, expansive windscreen, nice low cowl, broad dashboard, no stuff in the middle here, nice and open. We have deeper window glass. We have a much bigger sunroof above here than what the Hyundai has. All of that gives it a feeling of expanse. It feels like a bigger car inside, even though we know that outside the dimensions are almost exactly the same. The Kia is a better car for someone who might be larger framed. These seats are broader, flatter, less supportive, but also more accepting of different body types. All that sort of stuff really does make a difference, I think, for a lot of people. Firstly, this full-size water bottle fits in all four doors, which the Hyundai can't do, even in the front doors. Just little things like that. It has wireless Apple CarPlay instead of a cord in the Hyundai. Just little things like that elevate it to a slightly more modern position. Even having two 12.3-inch screens instead of the Hyundai smaller screens, and also the 8-speaker Harman Kardon in this car is slightly stronger than in the Hyundai, although they're both still pretty good. In this car, I think it is definitely better. It's just some of the detailing inside the K4 that lets this GT line version down a little bit. Now, I love the black and white coloring of the seats and the steering wheel, even though black and white, is that even a color? This is all actually really quite cool, but it's also all artificial leather around the steering wheel, artificial leather on the seats. They say that it has some kind of sustainability, but sorry, petrochemicals, not made from animals, not biodegradable, not breathable. We're lucky that we're sitting here in the front where we have 3-setting fan cooling in the doors here, but anyone in the back seat's still sitting on vinyl in a $43,000 flagship sedan, and that is not the case in its Hyundai rival. This steering wheel here, big, thick spokes, fine if you're just cruising around, but when we drive it dynamically, as we shall discover shortly, not entirely ideal. I do love the layout of the dash though, being able to change the instruments from classic to full digital, having a proper T-bar automatic shifter just like the old days. That works brilliantly. All the connectivity's here. Everything's laid out really well. It's just that finally, when you go through some of the trims, and I know journalists get picked on for doing this, but it is very obvious here. This sort of finish on the top of the dash doesn't look particularly expensive. It certainly doesn't match with the finish down here. And then these lower plastics here and in the doors, they just seem cheap and they don't really have any consistency. You can see the seams that are in the stamping of these map pockets bits down here. The door bits at the top, they just don't really imply expense. It looks like it's been cost cut to be cheap. Even the front passenger's window doesn't have auto up down. No one does, except for the driver. And this is the flagship spec. About the only area where the K4 really has true surprise and delight is that both front seats here have these adjustable setting headrests where you can have it all the way to the front so you can sort of relax while you're on the freeway, or have it all the way to the back so it doesn't impede when you're wearing a cap or a hat. Other than that, it's just a little bit shortchanged from what you would expect in a GT line, and it's intriguing that the i30N line is actually higher quality interior. The visibility and the practicality of the K4 do play out really well in its backseat though. There is an airiness here that is superior to the i30 sedans. The headlining is black, just like in its competitor, but it actually has plenty of headroom. The lower belt line gives you better vision outside. You can fit a full bottle in the back doors here, which is hugely unusual in a Korean car, but here we are, proving that it isn't always the case. There's a reasonable amount of room below the front seats. I have this set all the way to the bottom. I've got a little bit of room. We do have this sort of hard plastic shell at the back here, but it gives you something else to grab into other than there. And on there, air vents in the center, just like the Hyundai, 2 USB-C ports, center seat, a little bit poo, just like the Hyundai, but these 2 outer seats here, and all of this vision, this is a terrific family sedan and better than its Hyundai rival in here, although only really by a marginal amount. The i30 sedan N-Line feels a lot more intimate inside its cabin than the K4, even though essentially the dimensions are roughly the same. The windscreen seems a little bit more curved here, the belt line's a little bit higher, the sunroof is substantially smaller, although still okay. It does have black headlining like its competitor, but it does feel more hemmed in because that is the case with the seats, which are way better than the K4's. The passenger doesn't get height adjustment manual like in the K4, but it has proper leather seats with proper bolstering. These seats feel like they're from an i30N. They actually grab you and hold on to you. And the trim is not vinyl. So that is a big step forward. It still has seat heating and seat cooling, all accessed here instead of the door. Although when you turn it on in the Hyundai, you hit it and it only goes to 1. Whereas when you turn it on in the Kia, it instantly goes to 3 and then you have to dial it back. Odd that they would have opposing views in that department. The screens in the Hyundai 2 are only 10.25 inch, which some years ago was plenty, but now 12.3 seems to be the standard. And these do seem smaller. They're not quite as flash in terms of the way you can play with stuff in the driver's instrument binnacle, but it is really, really similar. The main difference is that to have any smartphone connectivity, you need a cord in the Hyundai, whereas you don't in the Kia. And that is, again, showing its age. We still have the USB-A port down there too, which is what you've got to plug it into as well. It's got a USB-C, but it needs the USB-A for the connectivity. We do have a wireless charger down here. We do have a T-bar shifter here, although it's not a T, it is just a shape, but it's a proper shifter, not something on the steering column or push buttons or whatever. That's also really nice. It's this driver-centric cockpit that does stand out though. There's a curve here. It has this sort of bar in the center here that makes you very much feel like you're in the driving zone rather than the expansiveness of the K4. There is an intimacy too in the way that you drive. The steering wheel in the Hyundai is proper leather with perforation, not vinyl. It has slightly bigger wheel paddles here. It has a very obvious drive mode button here, whereas in the Kia it's down at the bottom of the spoke here. But you can also access that by just switching over to sport from drive when you're in there. So you don't need to push that button. You've got 2 ways to do it, and it all seems to work a little bit better. Speaking of which, is the quality. There is a consistency in here in the i30 that I wasn't expecting. I thought the K4 would be more plush, but it's not. It's the Hyundai. All this plastic, it's not screaming in high quality, but it's all consistent all the way through the dash, all the way into the doors. This sort of patterning on the dash that blends into the doors. It has this sort of pattern section here with some red stitching in it. That's nice and expensive feeling. The door handles with this metallicized matte finish. All of that works really nicely. The Bose stereo may not be quite as good as the Kia's, but it's still pretty good. Also 8 speakers. The biggest difference is that the Hyundai's doors are shaped to look cool, to blend into the dash, but not be practical. The only thing you can fit in the door is this tiny little water bottle here, 370 mils. Oh my God, this little juice that goes in here at a very odd angle. No water bottles, none of that stuff. So if you're into camping bottle chic, then the i30 sedan is not for you. Similar to the front, the i30 N-Line's back seat feels a little bit more intimate than the Kia K4's, but also similar, the seat comfort is just as excellent as it is really in both cars in the back seat here. The headlining is a little bit closer to my head. The belt line is a little bit higher. The window's a little bit shallower. The view forward a little bit less, but it's all still pretty good. The tow room is near identical. Legroom and footroom pretty much the same because it's the same wheelbase. Air vents the same. USB-C ports, similar position, all the same. The back door though does only still fit this 370mm juice that I have already drunk rather than a proper bottle. But really, that's about it, other than the quality. Again, here we have full leather seating with an armrest down the center, just like in the Kia, but we have better qualities in the doors, even though the practicality isn't there. The window does go almost all the way down, though, but I will say that this center seat here is, again, not comfortable, just like in the K4. Probably should also mention, too, that that fairly small sunroof in the front has no real impact on the backseat passengers in terms of vision, whereas in the Kia it does add an element of extra airiness. Kia Australia said its focus with the K4 GT line was to make it a more comfortable and less overtly sporting replacement for the Cerato GT. And for the most part, that really is what it does. It has a next generation platform, but still with multi-link independent rear suspension, still with the 1.6 litre SmartStream G, direct injection, turbocharged, 4-cylinder, although with adjusted power outputs, and now tied to an 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission. The thing is, all of that stuff just doesn't quite gel together like you would like. Much like the interior, where we have mixtures of surfaces that aren't quite as special as they should be, with some really, really good and clever things, the dynamics and the way the K4 drives fits a similar pattern. The engine has 142 kilowatts, 265 newton meters, so it's 8 kilowatts down on the Hyundai we're competing against here. The 8-speed obviously has an extra ratio, doing 110 k's an hour on the freeway. The Kia is doing 1900 RPM, whereas the Hyundai is doing 2350 RPM. So there is a slight difference in the way that they drive, but the real differences are in the calibration and in the focus of what the car is trying to be. And I'm not sure that the GT line really knows what that is. The engine has some real pep in it. It's punchy and strong. I think the K4 sounds a little bit snarlier and a little bit better at the top end than the i30 N-Line does, but it's really much of a muchness. The handling here, specifically the turn in from beyond a quarter turn lock to lock, and the handling poise is really lovely. The way that the K4 pivots into a corner is delightful, but the steering in normal feels a little bit disconnected and a little bit inconsistent in its weighting, whereas Sport is quite a lot firmer and arguably a little bit too firm, and that combined with this chunky steering wheel with these huge spokes doesn't quite feel as sweet as it does in the Hyundai. The engine too, tied to that 8-speed automatic, you think that the 8-speed auto would be better than the 7-speed dual clutch in the Hyundai, but it's just not. It is languid and doughy in its throttle response in normal. In Sport, it is much peppier, but it's arguably too peppy, and Sport mode knocks out 8th gear, so it doesn't quite have a sweet spot anywhere. The drivability of the transmission too, like at times it just feels like it's sort of surging and falling off. It's a little bit laggy. It just doesn't work as well as you would like it to. And the ride around town, the K4 GT line actually feels quite refined and does a pretty good job of absorbing bumps despite wearing 18-inch wheels. Definitely more so than the very firm and pattery old Cerato GT. And same with the engine. Without having that awful synthesized gurgle over the top of it, it just is a more mature and more sophisticated car. But the more that you ask of the K4, the greater its failings. The suspension, the damping just doesn't have the resistance to be able to handle really bumpy roads. On our test route, this K4 bottomed out at least half a dozen times, which is more than average, and really quite loudly too. And speaking of which, these Hankook tyres, the Korean-made Hankooks on this car, are really loud on coarse chip surfaces. And so while the K4 has this veneer of refinement and quietude, then it gets presented with some kind of challenge and it just falls apart a little bit. It just isn't quite there. And so we've got a combination of laggy transmission, not entirely ideal steering, not entirely ideal throttle response, handling that's good but doesn't have the grip or the composure of the Hyundai. It all just doesn't quite gel together. It's like, is the GT line a luxury car or is the GT line trying to be a sporty car? I feel like in this car, it has the potential to have a K4 GT, which should be a proper replacement for the old Cerato. That'd be really good. But for now, it's just not quite finished. If it drove as well as the i30 N-Line did, it would be a significantly better car because at its basis, it is a better car. It just doesn't have the consistency of one, and it doesn't drive like one. So what we're left with is a car that is really good as a four-door sedan, a four-seat family car with a huge boot, and for the most part is pretty good. But the more that you ask of it, and it has the capability of delivering, but in this current state of tune, it just can't get there. In contrast to the K4 GT line, the i30 sedan knows exactly the car that it wants to be, and that is a cut price i30N. And given that that car is one of the best performance cars of our time, the fact that this is even the light version shouldn't diminish how excellent this car is as a driver's car. From its steering weighting to its turn-in, its steering consistency, its handling feel, its poise, its grip, its tyre grip, its ride comfort, everything. The cohesion of all of these elements of its dynamics is excellent. It completely decimates the Kia's patchiness in these departments. It doesn't matter whether the steering is in normal or in sport, it's still medium strong. In normal you can just leave it and it still drives well. And it also has a smart drive mode too that uses the parameters of other modes and chooses the driving parameter itself, whereas the Kia does not have that. And so we're going from the Kia's sort of lumpy steering in normal to arguably too firm in sport. The Hyundai's fine, you just leave it in normal and it's fine. The dual clutch even, you'd think that the dual clutch might have a few more foibles in the way that it drives, but it doesn't. It is faster shifting, it has much better throttle response, it's better off the line, it is smoother at all times. And even though it doesn't have an 8th gear, that doesn't matter. Even accessing sport by just going whack with a gear lever and it's straight in sport, which is something you really only need so it'll hold gears more. It shifts faster at the top end, all of that stuff. It's really just a better realised car, combined with the fact that it's got a better steering wheel to hold, grippier seats. It just feels a part of you, whereas the K4 feels slightly baggy and just not quite what it could be. There are also two elements that really stand out in the Hyundai. One is that it does not have driver attention monitoring, which is the little thing above the steering wheel here in the K4, which needs to be turned off in 2 stages to get rid of it. It is super annoying. You cannot look at the touchscreen or do anything in the car without it going off, whereas here that feature is not available, and for that we can only be thankful because it is counterintuitive in its irritation. The steering wheel here is lovely and thin, it's proper leather, it's great to hold with your thumbs at 9:3, and the seats really hold you in place. This is a proper performance sedan that works with you, not against you. And finally, to the ownership. While the Hyundai may only have a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and the Kia has 7, the cost of the 5-year servicing of the Hyundai, which is 12 months or every 10,000 Ks, is $1,739, not $2,435. That's a big difference in price. And if you use that on top of the fact that this Hyundai is just under $1,500 cheaper to buy in the first place, I think that the value is actually in the older Hyundai, not in the K4 GT line. When model sharing and badge engineering is done expediently and on the cheap, it is always self-defeating. Nobody wins. But when joint engineering and model sharing is done intelligently, it can be a huge success, and you can end up with 2 completely different cars that share a lot of their underpinnings. And that's exactly what we have here, the i30 Sedan N line and the Kia K4 GT line. And so of these 2 cars, one of them knows exactly what it wants to be, and that is the Hyundai i30N line. It is trying to be a light version of an i30N. It's like a performance car, but not the full version of a performance car. And so the cohesion in the way that it drives, the way that its interior is finished, the way that it's set up, its seating, everything, tires, brakes, transmission, all of that, it's all together. It is a car that very much feels like it was designed by the engineering department, and the result is an excellent driver's car. The K4 GT line is very much a marketer's car. It feels like something that the marketing department tried to put together. And so in terms of the blend of its engineering elements, it just doesn't get there. It's just a little bit too patchy. It doesn't really know what it wants to be. It doesn't want to be a performance car, yet it has elements of that. It's trying to be a luxury car, but the Hyundai's better finished. It's trying to be a great family car, and for the most part, it does do that. But it still feels a little bit cheap. It doesn't drive as well as it should. It isn't as refined as it should. Its transmission's not as good as it should be, and it just isn't quite there. There's a great car waiting here, but this, right now, in early 2025, the K4 sedan is not there yet. And so, for a saving of $1,500 and for much cheaper servicing, you could have the i30 N-Line sedan, and that is the better car of the two. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you think the Kia K4 could have a GT version rather than this GT line here? Do you wish that you had the styling of this with the dynamics of the i30, which I kind of do? Let us know what you think about chasing cars. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video. Hit the notification bell, and thanks for watching.